Okay, so you've been bitten by the language bug.
Sound of amusement.
But I'm guessing you haven't really explored the world of invented languages.
Right.
And that's what we're diving into today with In the Land of Invented Languages.
Yeah.
We're going to figure out why people create languages from scratch.
Yeah.
And what it all means, what it says about language itself.
It's really wild, the stories in this book. You've got these people who thought that a new language could bring world peace. And then there are others who thought they could rewire how humans think just by changing their language. We even meet one guy who's like, yeah, God told me to invent a language. So
wow, that's something else. But where do you even start? I mean, if you're going to build a language like from nothing.
Well, the book starts in the 1600s with this guy, John Wilkins, and he was obsessed with this idea of philosophical language.
So philosophical language.
Yeah, like imagine a language that's so logical, so perfect that it reflects the actual structure of the universe.
Okay.
And to try and do this, he decided he had to categorize everything.
Everything. Hold on. How do you even, what category would you put a cat in?
Right. It's like, where do you even begin?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the problem Wilkins ran into.
Yeah.
I mean, the book gives this great example. His definition of, shit.
Okay.
He defined it as the reverse of that which is contained in the body by the second digestion being of a watery substance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I can see why that one didn't exactly catch on.
Yeah, not exactly catchy.
But it does make you wonder, if a genius like that couldn't make it work.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever actually created a successful constructed language?
Yeah.
I mean, what about Esperanto? People still speak that, right?
Esperanto is really interesting. It's actually well designed, grammatically speaking, and it has a surprisingly large, very active community.
Really?
But I think what the book really highlights is that languages, they're alive.
Okay.
They're shaped by the people who actually use them, not just, these rules written down somewhere. Esperanto shows that even if you have a logical structure, you still need that human touch,
So you're saying even a language built to be simple still needs that messy human element to really work.
Exactly. It's like, trying to bake a cake without any sugar.
Okay, I get you.
You can follow the recipe perfectly, but it's not going to be quite right without it. And actually, the book has a whole chapter about this simplified version of English called Basic English.
Basic English.
It was supposed to be this universal language, but it just felt off.
Interesting.
And that's because it's those quirks, those weird idioms and inconsistencies that actually give a language its flavor.
I see what you're saying. Which makes me think about invented languages, like in pop culture.
Yeah.
Klingon has to be the most famous one, right?
Definitely.
But that's not about, day-to-day conversations. It seems more about creating that alien feeling.
You're right. It's not exactly designed for ordering a pizza. But that's what makes Klingon such a fascinating case, I think. Because the guy who invented it, Mark Okrent, a linguist, he actually made it hard on purpose. Like the sounds, the grammar, it's nothing like any real language.
So is it kind of like a badge of honor to learn it then?
Yeah, totally. And it shows this really interesting side of invented languages. It's about identity, community, that love of a challenge.
Right.
The book even talks about this Klingon conference the author went to.
Wait, hold on. People have conferences in Klingon. You're kidding.
Oh, yeah. It's as wild as it sounds. People in full costume debating Star Trek in fluent Klingon, eating Klingon food.
That's amazing. I can't even... Okay, we have to go back to that.
Sound of amusement.
But it just goes to show you, these languages can take on a life of their own. They go way beyond, their original purpose. It makes me think about, what was it called? Charles Bliss and the Bliss Symbols.
Yes.
That wasn't even meant to be a spoken language.
No, you're right. Bliss symbols were supposed to be a universal written language.
Yeah.
Break down language barriers completely. But what's fascinating is that it ended up serving a whole different purpose altogether.
Really? Tell me more.
Well, it became this amazing tool for kids with cerebral palsy to help them communicate. Traditional writing systems just weren't working for them, but Bliss symbols could.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
And it makes you think about our assumptions, right?
Yeah.
You know that sign language isn't universal, right?
No way. Really? I always just figured there was one sign language.
Nope. There are tons of them all around the world, each with their own grammar and vocabulary.
Huh. The more you know.
And that's what this book does so well. It challenges those assumptions we have about language, those things we think are obvious.
Which makes you wonder, what else are we getting wrong?
Right.
The book also mentions something about, people trying to own a language.
Oh, absolutely.
which is a whole other can of worms.
It is, and the Logland story is a perfect example.
Hmm.
And it ties into this really intriguing idea in linguistics called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Have you heard of that?
I think I've come across it, but yeah, a refresher would be great.
Okay, so basically it's this idea that the language you speak actually influences how you think. It's controversial, for sure, but it brings up some really interesting questions. And that's what this guy, James Cook Brown, who created Logland, wanted to explore.
So wait, he invented a whole language to, like, test out a theory?
Yep. He designed Logland to be super logical, totally unambiguous, to try and eliminate how your native language might be affecting your thoughts.
Wow, that's dedication.
Right. But, and this is where it gets really juicy, that focus on logic actually caused this big conflict in the Logland community.
Oh, I see where this is going. The purists versus the more practical types.
Exactly. Brown was all about keeping Logland purely logical. But then there was this other group who loved the language but wanted to make it, a little more user-friendly.
Okay.
And this disagreement, it blew up into this full-on linguistic revolution.
No way.
Oh, yeah. They even created their own version of the language, which they called Lojban. It got pretty messy.
So now you got, what, two versions of the same language going head-to-head?
Basically.
But what happened to their experiment? Like, did Logland or Lojban actually prove anything about how language shapes thought?
Well, that's where it gets even more interesting. Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? Did they prove anything?
Right.
The Lojbanists were really passionate, I have to give them that.
Yeah.
They even ended up in court with James Cook Brown, the Logland guy.
Wait, seriously? Over the language itself?
Yeah, like a legal battle over who owned it.
How do you even, can you really own a language?
That's the question, isn't it? And it gets into this whole thing about intellectual property and, well, language is different, right? Especially when you have this community that's using it, evolving it.
Exactly. It's not like owning, like, a recipe or something.
Yeah. And the court actually agreed. They said Logland had become too generic to be trademarked, like trying to trademark the word chair.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay, but what about the whole reason they did all this?
Yeah.
Did Logland or Lojban prove anything about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis?
Not really, no. Lojban, it's an interesting experiment, but man, it is tough to learn, even for people who are fluent in other languages.
Oh, really?
Yeah. By trying to make it so logical, so precise, it ended up feeling really unnatural.
So it's like, by taking out the quirks of natural language, they made it even harder to use.
Exactly. And that kind of brings us back to what this book is all about. Invented languages, they don't just tell us about language itself. They tell us about our assumptions about language. Like there's this language called Ladan.
Ladan, okay. I've never even heard of that one.
Right. And it's a great example because it was designed from a woman's perspective.
What does that even mean? Designing a language for a specific gender.
Well, the linguist who created it, Suzette Haydn Elgin, she wanted a language that could express a woman's perspective in a way that she felt other languages didn't.
Interesting. How do you even do that? Where do you start?
Well, for example, she created special words for experiences that women have. And the grammar, it's structured to emphasize emotional nuance, which she said was often overlooked.
That's fascinating, but, it sounds incredibly difficult to actually pull off.
Oh, it is. But even though Ladan isn't widely spoken, it really got people thinking and talking about how much language can shape how we see the world.
That's so cool.
It is. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about language.
Seriously. This whole deep dive has been eye-opening.
Yeah.
So if you had to, sum it all up, what's the big takeaway about these invented languages?
I think it's that languages, whether they evolve naturally or someone sits down and creates them, they're really all about connection. They're about expression, identity, even playfulness.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They can be about trying to understand the universe, like that guy Wilkins back in the 1600s, or about challenging our ideas about something like gender with Ladan.
So in a way, these languages are just as messy and complex and fascinating as the people who make them.
Right, exactly. And they show this incredible human desire to connect, to express ourselves, to figure out this world we're living in.
It really makes you wonder what other hidden stories are out there just waiting to be discovered. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time.